Adaptation.
Good morning, Hanson.
We meet again. I was just watching you on another channel with the Good Dude Show from yesterday. What an excellent program. I enjoyed listening. I have not finished it, however. It's quite illuminating.
I feel like I shouldn't participate in those shows because I talk too much. But
I saw that. That Mark, go ahead.
sorry?
I got to get the name right. Make sure I don't botch it. Mortiz. He's quite an interesting character.
Well, of course, he's been around a long time. He's very bright.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a fascinating job.
What's it? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just I'm like, that's my job. I'm like, what's your job? Who do you work for, man? That's crazy.
Well, he has a, I don't want to go into it, but technically the problem with being an analyst, right, like that, which is a market analyst, which is the go-to guy, is finding someone to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Right. So the way you pay for it is one of three methods. It's, you work in sales, you work in consulting, you work in project management, or you work in production, which is delivery of the thing. And he can code. He doesn't like it. I think I'm somewhat similar. I think coding is fun for a while. But then the business problem becomes too interesting compared to the coding problem, right? So, and he's very, very bright. Unfortunately, he took what I was asking the wrong way, unfortunately, from how I intended it. But of course, I always think, how can I help him? Well, but anyway, it's kind of impressive, I don't interact with these guys. I haven't interacted with these guys in the past. I mean, it's just all been business. It's all business. So I don't really know that much. I mean, Maurice, of course, I know, right? I mean, because I've just known him a long time. And Brandon, I know, but you learn over time that Luke really does know quite a lot of stuff, especially about the financial system, right? Transaction processing, financial system. I had to do some of that work, so I understand it too. And so I was trying to figure out, where do these guys get their abilities from? And the answer is that we're just freaking born with it. It's just really the answer. I mean, and we gravitate towards. So you can gravitate towards something that keeps expanding your ability, or you can gravitate towards something that doesn't. And all these guys have gravitated toward it. The other thing we have is business acumen. Right, so people don't have silly ideas. So it's just always very interesting. And then you get Michael, who sends me these beautiful things on mathematics and offline. It's like, well, this is how to represent this in algebraic geometry, because what you're trying to do is, he goes through it, and therefore sex is just a derivation of and I'm like, God, I love this man, right? Because that's the real go to it nerd, we have people that are quite good, but they're either too aggressive, right? And they're right, or they're too they want to go to war, so to speak, or they are too, what we would call philosophical rather than scientific. And that seems to be pretty common. You just can't, you can find a great guy who's into philosophy, the literary model of analogy, and you can get great thinking, but they can't make hard decisions.
Huh.
And so what it takes, I think it takes the entrepreneur, the dad. I mean, you have to be in a condition where, or develop the habit of making hard decisions where you don't have a choice not to decide. And I think that's the other piece. So, Brandon, and I mean, most of us are entrepreneurs, right? I mean, have been entrepreneurs. Martin is interesting because he is the entire personality trait system, right? But he didn't go through he went from being a leftist or typical, he wouldn't say that, but a typical normie guy, right? To realizing this isn't working. What am I doing wrong? And then reforming. Of course, self-reform is the whole problem, right? I mean, that's the whole question. Can you make yourself adapt? And so what you really find that's the common trait among everybody is adaptability. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a.
No, that's interesting because it kind of segues into a thought that I had over the week, which is this what we call quantum pressure is what you would call it. Quigley would call it tensions of evolution.
Correct.
And it's like the issue is the discomfort that is associated with this pressure that causes you to seek to adapt. And it's like what I've noticed is it's interesting in the doing my job is like there's this crazy thing which is like this reverse progress. So we have these tools, they give us tools, and it's the computers, and the computers increasingly increase my workload because there's more people on the other side increasingly burdening me, and it's slowing my computer down and making me have to process information that is extraneous to the immediate problem that I have, which is dealing with the patient's problem. And it's like, it's negative progress. And it's like,
yeah.
what this represents is it's oppression. It's the system is reversing it's reversing the demand for adaptation from the lower adaptable class to the higher adaptable class.
Correct.
Which is just the most god-awful thing.
That's awful. I haven't thought about it that way.
It's flowers for Algernon, man. It's total Leninism. Because it's like what we do is we make it easy for the people to not adapt, and the people who can adapt will deal with the shit, boys.
So let me ask you a question, because I've noticed something in my, because I've had a lot of health issues. So you used to have a pretty personal relationship with a doctor who was using a yellow pad, and you were maintaining all this thing. So you had the full attention of the individual who was just making notes. Those notes somehow got to some woman who typed them up in something. I don't know if they just got the yellow pad, the yellow paper just got stuck in the file.
Sometimes.
All right.
Usually it would be like this note. The notes used to be like this big.
Yeah.
And now they're like, okay, so I get a cardiologist notes that's 6 or 8 pages long. And I can't even find the damn patient's name on it. It's like, you got to be kidding me. I'm searching all over the place. Where is the patient's name? And it's like, it's a bunch of hooey for some insurance guy to justify the bill that has gone on. And it's just like, it's for administrative purposes only. And it's just the most god-awful nonsense ever. It's really ruining medical communication. And with regard to doctor-patient relations, what it has done is it's distracted the doctor.
Exactly. Because
now he's satisfying all these administrators that are somewhere off in the ethers over here in the computer, and he's not dealing with the patient. And it's like the doctors are light bulbs that get changed out. And I call this it's reversion to the mean, which is the model that the government has is there's 2 models. There's either the Veterans Administration or the Indian Health Service. That's what everyone will get. would
Mhm.
say that they're abysmal because it's just there's no personal care. There's just you go see somebody who's a provider. It's just awful. Sorry. That was
No, I mean, I agree with this, but it's like I say that the problem is easily fixable. I went to, I used to complain because I've opened companies in other countries, right, especially in Europe. And I'm pretty much an Anglophile, right? I mean, I love everything. That's my ancestry, of course. But when you try to do business over there, it's like everybody takes such pride in trying to make sure there's no penny lost that it forces everything to grind to a halt. So the cost of it's like the credit card companies are actually pretty good at this. Look, the cost of trying to decrease fraud, right, is higher than the cost of in other words, it's better to write stuff off than to try to do any more to fix this, right? So you're actually seeking equilibrium of returns.
right.
But the British aren't like that. They just keep doubling down on the stupid fucking idea of trying to feel self-righteous by protecting a rich country, the members of a rich country, from somebody screwing up on pennies. And what do I love about American entrepreneurship is it's like, if I do a business deal with you and we come to the thing that we're going to make a mutual reciprocal beneficial to you, you come back to me and like, dude, this didn't work out right. I'm like, sure, okay, let's do it this way instead. So it's a highly adaptive model. The highly adaptive models built on two things. I mean, a very high trust society, and it's built on a legal system that is not proscriptive. Doesn't say excuse me, I have that wrong. Don't take that. A legal system that is post hoc. In other words, you only get into the regulation legal system if you actually come to conflict. Whereas in the European system, like the continental system, they tell you how something's got to be done because they don't want you to get into conflict, which is, of course, maladaptive, right? I mean, not allowing people to get into conflict is maladaptive. So you wonder why the Americans have the major stock market and all the innovation, the British have the bond market and a little less so, and everybody else is behind. It's because the Anglo system of common law is more adaptive, and it produces a society that's more adaptive than the continental. Well, you can see that is that Americans have somewhat resisted, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze, somewhat resisted the except for three times, except for under FDR and Johnson and Obama, we've resisted the leftism more so than our Europeans, because the Europeans are seeking security, not opportunity. And we're seeking opportunity, not security, over security. It's the other way, I should say not. It's security over opportunity, right, versus opportunity over security. And I lost with the question. I'm sorry. I haven't finished my coffee yet. So what?
That's good.
So I don't know. Should I continue? We may have on those meetings now and then, or should I avoid meetings?
Your call on that one, if you like.
They like you a lot.
Oh, that's nice. It's gratifying. It's gratifying.
Really, I expect you to say, well, they should, or of course they.
So now I was watching the staff meeting too from last week, and it's like this. It's come to my attention that my job here is to cause you to disambiguate science from policy, because it's like,
well, you keep trying to narrow it down to a job, but you have like 10 jobs.
I know, but this is my momentary job. Is see, the issue is this: is the science is not biased, right? Science has no bias except for the truth.
Well, it's hard to imagine. I had this with some Islamic guys yesterday. And when you say, when you're talking about the difference is we've discovered decidability, which to others might seem like bias. Right. Right. And so that's true. The second thing is the form of government I'm recommending is a menu, not a command, right?
Okay.
Right. It says this is what you can have if you can get to it, right? If you can behave well enough to have it. And the policies I've put in place, as far as I know, are economic policies. There you go. Sorry. The economic policies are also science, right? The difference is that those economic policies need to change, to vary according to circumstance, right? The government needs to vary a little bit according to circumstance, and the law never varies.
Okay.
So, if you're in war, if you're a going concern, you need to have markets as much as possible, which is a mixed economy. And that's got to adapt, right? If you are outed policies that result from the fact that your government's got to adapt, the policies have to adapt too, right? But you can still set principles for the basic things like education and family and whatever, because it's effectively, there's still markets of calculation. So as long as you've organized it so they can calculate, that's fine. As long as you've organized the governments to calculate. But you have to be able to regulate what's being calculated. In war, you have to be able to, pretty much turn everything away from individual fulfillment to everything to collective necessity.
Yep.
In policy, you're trying to say, well, what's preserving reciprocity within limits of proportionality, within the limits of our competitive ability. In other words, how do we stay competitive?
Right.
And then with the law, which it just never changes. Natural law is natural law, natural law. It's going to be that the same way gravity is always going to be gravity. So you have this, we have to think about it as a rigid foundation of flexible government and a very flexible set of policies. So if I want to, because there's no reason you can't build of a pretty authoritarian policy under government under natural law, right? I mean, there's an authoritarian in the sense that, one person makes a lot of decisions. So a reason you can't do that, you still bound the person by natural law. You can still make policies that violate natural law if you're doing it to create a debt in order to, and in order to produce a surplus. Well, that's what we do when we go to war, right? We create a debt in order to produce a surplus, or at least not incur a loss. So I think when you say science, what does that mean? The science of the physical world is adaptive. It can't adapt, right? I mean, it is just in the sense that its adaptation is deterministic, whereas the human adaptation is not deterministic, right? We can move within a pretty wide sphere, and then in other words, the individual mind of man. As a species, our adaptivity is well, frankly, infinite, as long as we can find a way to discover, make use of, and apply the energy that we want at increasing scales. So, I mean, it's so when somebody says scientific, I get a little worried. What is that? I don't know what that means to that person, right? It means testimony, right? Science means testimony. And the purpose of testimony is to iteratively, right, recursively, discover the first principles, which allow us to falsify any statement within whatever range of competency we've discovered the first principles. But the first principles are fixed in the physical world, which is what people think of. They're malleable in the the social political world and the technological world, they are extraordinarily malleable, right? I mean, permutable. So so when we're talking about science, it's getting very difficult to talk to anybody, because once you learn to think in series, right?
Right.
There's no idea that exists on its own, right? As a
Right.
statement, every idea exists on a spectrum. So once you think like that, I mean, trying to talk to somebody, you're like, well, I'm defining science as, I'm using the term science, which you're familiar with, because it's the best term we have. But the best term we have is also insufficient, because it's just a name. It's not an operational description. So if you operationalize what science means, the production of testimony that discovers first principles, which form a formal logic, which can be used to falsify any statement within the domain of those first principles, then of course, you've produced a formal logic. At which point, it's not really science anymore. The science is complete, right? The logic, it's actually a logic. Right, because it's like math. I mean, you can still experiment with math, which they call science, which I sort of not sure I agree with, but okay, right? But the foundations of math aren't going to change.
Right.
It's still a pretty simple, stupid thing. So it's so hard to talk to people, because they get, without you going on to this, like I'm doing now, some voluminous explanation of every fucking term you're using. Right? I mean, the meaning it doesn't quite get across. And so it's only people who are willing to stick with it that you can educate. And even when you tell somebody, well, everything I'm doing is in order, to continuous recursive disambiguation, by continuous recursive falsification, to discover the first principles, right? The universal principles, which I can then use to form a formal logic that I can use to falsify any statement within it. And any statement that survives is therefore a truth candidate, right? I mean, when you go off, you're going to laugh at me because I just got me.
I have to put the time marker so I can find that and write it down, because it's awesome.
Because that's what we're doing, right?
That said it pretty well.
That's what we're doing. And I'm like, but when you talk to the people, have no idea that even it's like before evolution, people can't imagine such a thing can be, right? That it's possible to produce a formal logic of all human experience. It absolutely is. And we have enough information to do it at the level of precision that frankly, anything else will be a minor increase in precision. It won't be right. It'll be.
That's right. It's minimally adaptive.
Yeah, it just, all it'll do is like, well, I mean, at some point you're saying a first principle. Well, I mean, we might discover that a good example would be, I mean, I just use this because it's a sci-fi like thing that's not impossible. We might discover that if you got a sun, right, a solar system that produces cycles of stars really fast, that's producing increasingly heavier elements, but for some reason, there might be some amazing first principle that emerges from the next equivalent of the table, what do you call it? Table of the elements, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. There might be another one up there that we can't imagine because we have experience with it, but it contains much higher energies, right? That decay in different frames. Now, that's probably not possible, right? That's not going to happen, but it's just an example of the kind of thing that could happen. But the first principles of that thing would still be based on the first principles of the existing chemistry, which is still based on the first principles of the particles, which would be on the waves, which would be on the quantum background, which would be on whatever grains of whatever madness are underneath the quantum background that caused that boiling sea of random nonsense to be sustained. So, I mean, it's just, so it's like, it's talking to people. It's like I said it. I mean, other philosophers have said that you just basically have to leave town because there's nobody to talk to anymore. You like help preserve my sanity.
That's important to me. Okay. It's important. It's like,
but I mean, if people can't, what I said there really quickly in speech, that's not imaginable. I mean, if you went back to, Gödel and Kurt Gödel, and you went back to, or you went back to Hilbert and these guys, and you had this conversation. They would understand it. They just wouldn't yet know it was possible, right? There's no way, but we know now, right? And the problem is, how do you know that? You know how many fields you have to master to identify the pattern?
Huge thing.
Right. And then once you do that, you have to falsify that pattern that you've identified in every field. Right. It's fucking exhausting. Right.
Yep. And like
it's like, well, go ahead.
I asked you some time ago, why'd you start this project? You said no sane person would do
No
it.
sane person would do it. It's insane.
It's just impressive. It's like that. I got to tip my hat for you, and maybe tip some coffee too, because it's like, that's awesome work, man. And it's like stick-to-itiveness.
And then, the people want me to be either speak like a politician, speak like a professor, speak like a priest, right? Or even speak like a CEO. And I'm like, dude, I gave up all that shit. If you don't want the fucking answer, just, I'm going to be me and fuck you. And it's a little bit like, who's the guy that lived in a barrel?
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Greek.
Yeah. And I feel a little bit like him.
He was a crazy man, a wild man.
Well, but he was, well, I mean, it's hard to imagine. We can't go back and imagine Athens, right?
No.
But it's right. I can if I really work at it for like a half a second, I can make a model, right? But you got to imagine that it's almost like a carnival,
right?
Right. At that point. So of course, if you can get attention the way our scientists could get attention, or our technology entrepreneurs could get attention today.
Right.
Right. And so,
right.
And so there's that. So of course he had his reasons for it, but I feel a little bit like him, which is like, dude, if I want to just be an ordinary guy and not feel like I got to put on airs, then that's what I'm going to do. And fuck you if you don't like it.
That's right. I like that plan.
My ex-wife said, who's a beautiful, intelligent, capable, she says, I'm over 40. I've proven everything I need to prove to the world. So go fuck yourself.
That's right. That's the right answer. It's like the straitjacket costs too much to put on.
Yes.
Just who needs it? It's just too much work. It's like, okay, just be yourself. And I determined that by dealing with patients, and I was trying to please patients, and I was like, I made the wrong people mad at me, and the right people liked me. Oh no, the wrong people mad at me, and the right people didn't like me. And it's like, whatever. This is nonsense. So I just quit even trying. And it's like, then
I have to sometimes sit down with you, because this is clearly a big deal for you, and this experience you went through. So sometime offline, I want to hear this.
Okay.
Because right now I can pretty much put it together, but I just like to hear that sometime offline.
There you go.
I tell all my horror stories in public because they're I just view them as comedies.
That's the right answer. It is. It's a humorous. It's a tragedy of errors, or comedy of errors, or something like that. So the other thing I did was I worked on why do people always double down? And it comes down to they double down because it's neural parsimony.
Yes.
They just the pressure to conform from outside being forced upon them is compressive and makes them crystallize out as a group to the group evolutionary strategy. Unavoidably.
Well, think of it this way. What does neoteny do? It prolongs infant and child cognitive adaptability, right? And that's the whole thing. And it prolongs, it maintains our non-aggression. Our essentially, neoteny produces play, right, rather than aggression. And so for most of us, those of us who are biologically okay, we maintain that neoteny throughout our lives. But um, just because of the economics of training your brain, right, and the natural decay that happens in our life, the development and decay that happens in our lifestyle, in our life cycle, you're just going to lose adaptability over time. Now, so this is excuse me, you're going to lose some adaptability over time, right? Some of us, however, specialize in adaptability. Does that make sense?
Does.
Some of us don't. Now, we call this intelligence. It's just adaptability. And so if you have a higher intelligence, you'll maintain adaptability longer because there's a lower cost of neural reorganization. Whereas if it's harder for you to make every single connection, especially connections across distance, and increasingly across distances, the brain is one thing, but across states is another. In other words, across recursive cycles is another. So people can't follow logical deductions, etc. They can't follow these chains. So, adaptability is a great thing to be able to have, right? But even as your brain ages, what happens is you've developed so many patterns. In other words, you've turned from a lot of back roads into a smaller number of really good superhighways, right? And so that's the trick. Where it's really what you want to do is you want to develop as much correspondence with the reality as possible, because it allows you to move the most neural traffic, right? Because now everything moves really easily because nothing is being falsified. No traffic's being stopped. So, I mean, I don't know. There must, given that we've tried to teach this general concept as hydraulics, right? As water, as hydraulics, as traffic, and as economics. You really, the difference between hydraulics, or how electricity and current and all this other stuff, and water and natural forces work, and how traffic forces work, is just the difference between the physical world and the behavioral world, right? And so if you have those two models, I mean, they're the same process by slightly different, with slightly more adaptivity available to the traffic model. But I mean, if we just taught people how cities evolve traffic patterns, like old world circles, wheel cities, and then the Romans start out with the rectangle, right? Rectangular camp, which they built into a town, and how that affects the traffic patterns, and why we came up with a grid system, and the interstate system, and how building more highways just makes the problem worse.
That's quite interesting, isn't it?
So it's not impossible to teach the core principles to a kid, right? And we just don't. We don't teach them. We teach them a lot of ideal, which is the opposite of what we want to teach them. We don't want to teach people an ideal. We want to teach people a series, right? What's the spectrum that can go on here? But for some reason, rather than saying, it's like a spelling thing, spell the word blah. Well, okay, great, right? Now tell me what this concept, define this concept. Okay, well, when you define that concept, did you give one definition? Did you give all definitions? Are those definitions consistent and coherent? How are they consistent, coherent? How are they inconsistent, and incoherent, right? Well, it's the same thing with anything else. Well, if I'm going to teach you arithmetic, accounting, algebra, geometry, etc. Well, that series is available to people, but we don't think about teaching the whole world as that series, right? Which is there's these very simple processes that have to do with the subatomic world, the atomic world, natural world, the biological world, and the human world. And why can't a kid sit there and chant those series like he does the fucking ABCs? There's absolutely no reason. I mean, you have to memorize your times tables. Christ knows how horrible that was for most of us, right? And so why can't you memorize a bunch of series? Well, there's no reason you can't. But the trick is memorizing the series creates a very different human being than memorizing an ideal.
That's right.
You create a very different human being. And so it's like, like the number of times I think I've said this 100 times. The number of times I've told women that, they use the Oprah model.
Okay.
With your feelings. How are you going to feel about it now? How are you going to feel about it in an hour, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months, 3 years, and 30 years, right? Go through that thing and your mind will adjust. The problem is you have to habituate yourself to do that. My always thing is, what's the worst that can happen? Can I live with it? Okay, well, it's not too bad, right?
Right.
And this is the problem of thinking in ideals. They become utopian.
Right.
And they become maladaptive because they don't provide, the ideal provides a sufficiency for imitation by someone giving in authority. In other words, some authoritarian person giving you information so that you'll be obedient by creating these ideals, versus empowering you to make decisions within the framework of existence because you understand the causal relation between states rather than an ideal. Is that too deep and nerdy?
That was perfect.
Okay. Just
You ready to begin?
I don't know. We're sort of done a good intro here, and we've hit a couple of fun topics. So I suppose it's about time to do real work. Do I really have to?
I want to push this again. This so Quigley talks about the institutions of oppression control the politics of the nation, and it is the oppression which pushes the adaptive requirement or the pressure around in the society, and the Leninists are moving it from the bottom to the middle.
Okay. Wow, there's so many places to go with that. Let's take that. Let's break that into part. The institutions of oppression.
Right.
What does that mean? But I should write it down first. Let me write it down so I don't lose track of what we're doing. The institutions of oppression.
The institutions of oppression govern the political life of the nation. That's Quigley, 154.
Okay.
The institutions of oppression control the adaptive pressures upon the elements of society. That's my interpretation. And the Leninists seek to remove the oppression from the maladaptive classes, which is the lower classes, to the middle class. And that is why your science is correct, and that the Leninists are devolutionary. That explains why, because it squeezes the middle and expands the bottom.
Right. Which is top and bottom against the middle, when the middle is what innovates. So they don't want to allow the middle to innovate and get ahead.
That's right, because they are afraid to get left behind, because it goes to what the economists always talk about this, and I was able to integrate that this week too, which is the fear of missing out.
Yes, fear of leaving behind, yeah. Which is envy.
That's right. That's
well,
right.
There's positive jealousy. Jealousy, no. What's the first one? Admiration, jealousy, envy,
Yeah.
right? So admiration causes you to imitate. Jealousy causes you to work hard, but envy causes you to do harm. Right?
You saw the document I sent you, the 7 deadly sins in the natural order of science as you present it. Did you see that one?
When did you send that?
It's been a while. I'll send it to you again.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not coming to mind. I mean, the minute I see it, I'm sure I'll recognize it.
I like the series though. I like the series on each one of them because it's like this. There is a positive element associated with it, right? So like gluttony goes from appetite, right? Interest, appetite towards gluttony, which is destructive. So there's a positive and a negative element on both of them. I think all 7 of them. So I will work on that. That'll be giving me something to do.
Yeah, like I use this on the male-female spectrum all the time. Because whenever you see one sex doing something, figure out how the other sex is doing it. Right? And you end up with there's this fucking equilibrium at all times, and and of course we all want to be right because of course we're us and we're right? So it doesn't matter what sex you are, or race, what age, it doesn't matter. We always want to be right? Because that's neural economy.
Right. Being wrong is hard, man. It just costs too much. It's like, oh,
I don't want to be wrong. I want to be right. I want to be right. It's because basically being right means you got a freebie, right? You pulled the lever on the, the deer walked into your camp and stood there and said, "Shoot me." I mean, it's that's what happens when you want to be right. You want the deer to walk into your camp. But I want to go back to your statement. The institutions of oppression govern the. What do you mean oppression?
that's Quigley.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know.
Class oppression. Excuse me, I did not specify this.
Uh,
Quigley specifies it's class oppression. And so the Leninists are
It's not oppression, it's domestication.
well, yeah, no, but that.
Oh, wait, it can be. Right, so Europeans domesticate.
It's just I'm
You can
saying.
domesticate or you can exploit.
Well, right, but it's like there's a universal term for both. Okay, and it's like the universal term. There's that they oppress somebody. Somebody's getting pressed, which is the pressure of adaptive evolutionary tensions being directed in one particular direction by the system. And that is the system is the institutions of class oppression.
Oh, it's just evolutionary pressure.
But it's being directed by the institutions of state of the state we're in, of the civil.
Can we use coercion?
They must.
Coercion is a fact, but it's value neutral. Right? You're trying to influence.
So institutions of class coercion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be acceptable.
Yeah, let's use coercion.
So we're modifying Quigley to meet our.
Well, he's saying that everything's oppressive, and it's not. I mean, it might, you domesticate an animal, but they're fucking better off after they're domesticated, right? I mean, we domesticate children. They're better off after they've been domesticated.
I'm good with the edit.
So so I just want to do it for the audience.
Right.
So you can use the institutions of coercion to evolve a people, right? In other words, to make them better. That's education, forcible education. You can domesticate them, right? Or you can exploit them. And obviously, when you make people chattel slavery, and you put them in the fucking mines, you exploit them because you're treating them as animal labor. There's no reciprocity there. And you're not improving the person.
Right.
I mean, basically, domesticating and evolving people are capital improvements. So,
That was a good.
Well, it's another example of always fucking take a term and disambiguate it by serialization and operationalization so that you don't create an ideal that is misapplicable, right? Which causes at the very least causes confusion. So, I mean, the classes have to, I mean, how do you domesticate the upper class?
It's hard.
It's fucking hard, but then again, they're not too many of them, and they need help. And so the problem is that their customers, their clients, their employees, keep them in line, because eventually you get too much of a pain in the ass, somebody kills you. And the reality is that most groups form an equilibrium of elites, all of whom survive, but none of which can obtain extraordinary power. So you have both horizontal controls and vertical controls. The problem is you get Xi Jinping or a Mao Zedong or Lenin or a Stalin, and it's too dangerous for peers to control them. And because they've made it so dangerous for peer control, they've made it too dangerous for horizontal control. I mean, a vertical control.
Yep.
So that's why you say the only way to do totalitarianism is fear. It's the only way, because it's the only way to overcome the market competition, the horizontal peer competition, so which in most civilizations reach some sort of equilibrium where everybody's doing about the best they can without angering anybody else that's going to make them go away.
Right.
So you're seeking that equilibrium of market. And of course, the average person thinks it's like a family, right? Well, there's dad and he's powerful because, well, where does he get the power from?
Right.
I mean, where does this person get this power from? Right? I mean, it's the same thing with like these CEOs. What power does that CEO have? Well, he really has the power to allocate resources.
Right.
That's about it. Right? Because he's got fucking customers and employees and investors and bankers and his top 1%, which is all that matters, right? And he's got 99% of the populace of his people that have to feel that they're being taken care of, and that 1% isn't too special, right? You got all these fucking games going on, but these are all to create the equilibrium that maintains a competitive advantage, right? But that maintains a competitive advantage and maintains internal stability or stable relations.
Right.
We're trying to create organizations of stable relations against, including things that, unlike the physical world, are always trying to find opportunities to defect for better returns. So it's this production of stable relations we call organizations through admixture of incentives that are great. The problem is, when you go all the way to the force triangle, you're just stuck with authoritarianism. Right? You're just stuck there because the only way to get there is fear. And then all of a sudden you have the Putin Z problem, which is that nobody tells you the fucking truth anymore.
Yes, that's it. They're afraid to tell you the truth, and then you're done.
And look how many million people Z's made disappear. I mean, he's as bad as fucking Stalin. I fucking hate those Leninists, man. I just hate them. And every time Hillary Clinton opens her mouth, that's what I hear. I hear female Leninist. Because that's what she is. And it's not like I'm saying that as first. No, she was in those groups in university. She wrote papers in favor of this model, and she wanted to practice this model and tried to implement it in the government. So no, it's not a fucking opinion. It's not like I'm casting aspersions. Jesus.
That was a good segue right there.
I don't. You don't want to become. Somebody says, Curry, you got to be careful you don't become the Archie as we age, we can't become Archie Bunkers. We're just
Who says that? I want you to know I was considering this because I was of the opinion Rob Reiner he wasn't playing a part. He is the meathead.
Oh, he really is.
And it's like this. I wanted to create a new version of Archie Bunker 2.0. You ready? It's going to be like this. It's set in the present time. And now Meathead is the old guy in the chair, and Archie was right. There's nothing Archie said was wrong. Archie was right. I feel like watching all of those again, and just to get a feel for it, because I'm pretty confident Archie was right.
Yes. Well, what's funny is that was on when I was a kid, right? That was a show.
Right.
And so my mother would turn it off whenever it came on. I mean, we're talking about when we had 3 channels, right? And it was
right.
Even pre-cable. And so I think we had a color TV by then. Yeah, it was color TV by then. And so Archie, this show comes on, and my mother says, I can't watch that because he's just your father. It's like, I already live with your father. I don't need more. I don't need more. Of course, my father's like, Republican councilman in a small fucking farm town. Used to dress up the florist delivery van and make it up as an elephant for parades.
Right.
Like I said, he should have never gotten married. He should stay in the military, and should have gone in the police, and should have come out of military and gone into politics. And he would have been fine because it's just his thing.
Huh.
My great grandfather on my mother's side is the same. Perfect politician, except he was a really good one. So anyway,
right.
So you've hit this really interesting thing, which is Leninists seek to remove the class coercion from the lower classes to the middle class, right? Well, I mean, and what are they really doing? They're trying to stop adaptation, or they're trying.
Oh no, they're just taking advantage. They're just it's a power grab. They don't want to lose to the middle class. Because they can't be in charge of a middle class society on a permanent, ongoing basis.
Yep. Well, they also can't, this is my big problem with the big lie, right? Is that you think you can be in charge. Why do you think you know? I mean, that's what why do you think you know?
Well, see, they want stasis because they are in charge, and stasis is their benefactor, right? Goes to Kronos, it's Saturn, everything is frozen in place.
Well, it's computationally simple.
They don't have to adapt.
Right, they don't have to adapt. They don't want to pay the cost of adaptation.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, it's like their education, training, all this investment, this does help them adapt, right? But then, you have the problem of there's a point at which you can't adapt, no matter what we do. And depending on the society, that's 5% of the population, 50% of the population, or in some cases, it's like almost 80% of the population. And you wonder why they don't adapt. In other words, why they're undeveloped. Because they can't adapt.
When they're fully developed.
Well, they're fully developed for them.
Well, that's it. You're fully developed as you are. And it's like, if you're fully developed, your adaptability is low, but you're adapted to the circumstances as long as the circumstances don't change too much.
And so that's why what they do is they wait until they can imitate, right? Rather than calculate, right? They don't have to calculate. They just look for what to imitate. And that's the way that's how shit spreads, dude. I mean, That's why I keep saying it's possible for almost everybody, right? You just can't want. It's on as a human being on the planet Earth with this level of technology, you cannot really be left behind, right? Eventually, your group is going to get there. And so the problem we have is that we don't live infinite time lifespans, right? And so we don't want, it doesn't matter to us that our life is going to feel like we're being left behind, despite the fact that the future, within a generation or two, we won't be. But it's like I always say, look at Africa. I mean, the fucking place is going crazy with growth. Of course it is, because there's enough infrastructure around the world, right? And they've got now this wonderful thing called communication, gets
Right.
access.
Just crazy, Bill.
Right. And so they are getting there. Now, do you go to some place like I'm trying to think of somewhere it's not. I mean, the one I know is Nigeria. So if you go to someplace Nigeria, the big cities Nigeria, yeah, it may look like they're still poor and backward, but it's not like they don't know the route to not being poor and backward. I mean, it's a very different world they live in. And you listen to them interviewed on the street, and they're not like these blank-faced tribesmen of 100 years ago. They're like us.
Huh.
Right? They're just, that's all. And so it's just very hard. So, the problem we get to is that, the providing people that hope, stupid little cell phones, the informational availability,
right?
Access to imitative rather than calculative information, right? So I can do that. That's fucking huge.
Oh yeah.
Right. That it's like education, right? We educated people and look what happened. We didn't education people and look what happened. It went from Roman education to medieval lack of it. Right. And look what happened to those people. Man, they were fucking easy to enslave. Right. But now you go, it's like I said, you go to, you keep seeing these guys go and do their research through Africa, and you find some fucking guys trading camels the same way they did in 880. Excuse me, camels were a more recent invention than that. Right? The same thing we did 1,000 years ago, right? Right. And they're trading camels, and they fucking got a goddamn app for it on the phone. I mean, what the fuck? That's just so, if it weren't for the Leninists, the world would be a good place.
It's a great place.
No, they're the ones fucking it up.
Leninists have a place, and they're doing their job, which is to take the soft out of the West. Because Westerners are soft and they need smacked in the head, and that's what the Leninists are good for. Okay. It's like, is that what it takes to wake you up, fatso? Boom, right?
We were doing fine until they came here. We should have McCarthy era screwed up. They should have said, we had.
I know that's the other one. That's the other one is McCarthy was right.
We should have just found every single one of them, hung them on a rope. When the Frankfurt school started doing their shit, hung them too, and that would have been over. And that's the lesson we have to learn.
I'm good with that. Now is that a good enough segue? Past the graveyard?
Well, and now I got to talk about skull pyramids or something.
I know, that's where we were at. We were just walking past the skull pyramid.
I love this ironic masculine humor, right? The problem is you used to be able to make ironic masculine humor. Everybody understood it was ironic masculine humor. Now you have like the 30% of females who are or liberals, who we know now are by the science are mentally unhealthy. That's why they're liberals. And at the minute you say something ironic like that, which is called hyperbola, right?
For the audience, right?
What?
For the audience.
right? It's hyperbole, right? It's an extreme exaggeration, as if but it's meant to take. It's basically focusing on an attribute of something, right, in detail, and exploding it into its ultimate conclusion. But it's supposed to be funny, right? But they can't stand the truth in any way, and they certainly can't stand a magnifying glass on the truth. And so,
and wait, even less so the man looking through the magnifying glass.
yeah, and they don't want the man looking at. What a minute, you're looking into our feminine lying system, and we don't like it because we like our hiding behind our lies because it lets us get away with stuff. I don't like what you fuckers have taught me this year.
Sorry. Oh,
I was much happier. I was much happier in my
your bubble.
ignorance.
Yep. Sorry, Kurt.
All right, just making a note here so I don't.
I thought that one was pretty good.
You just love seeing me get frustrated and go on.
Whatever disturbs you, I find interesting.
Yes,
it's like it's a special class of things that cause you disturbance. No small. It's not a small thing. It's like that's noteworthy. Put a star on it.
Okay. All right. Okay, so
ready to share.
I gotta
right, get back into it. Back to the wait.
Oh, I know what I'm trying to do this time. I just got to get over there. All right, so I'm gonna switch over to the screen now.
Okay.
Wish we gotta try StreamYard.
Okay.
So that we can have our heads be a little bigger.
Okay.
So we're going to do share screen, and we're going to go to this one, and we're going to share it. Because on the recording, where are we on the?
We're tiny in this corner on the right-hand side. Okay. Polities institutions.
Okay, so I haven't put that one in yet. I got to do that one still. So what did we cover? I believe we did law, right? We did law.
Yes. That's right.
We did morality, right?
Yes.
So I'm trying to work my way through. You know, I knew exactly what we're going to talk about an hour ago before we started talking.
Then what happened?
On. And now I've lost it. So, disambiguating the evolution of anger. So we're trying to disambiguate law into the universal laws of cooperation, agreement, law, privilege law, and command law, right?
Right.
Then we talked about the way we try to. Did we talk about morality?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we talked about morality. And okay, so what I want to get to is what I want to talk about today was there's a difference between make the categories of laws and what we call legitimacy.
Yes.
Right? Or what's usually called the conflict between legality versus legitimacy, which we got to disambiguate.
Yeah.
Because it's not as in our world, it's not. It's the problem is which one of the what is legal along here. So the problem is that so that's what we want to get to, is that discussion.
Okay.
All right. So what did I want to cover here? I covered this. Disambiguating. All right. So I'm going to start with this. So last time we talked about disambiguating the evolution of the word law. And then, and so we had the universal laws, the physical, behavioral, evolutionary, logical, and the grammars. Then we had the types of agreement law, which is all natural law. And then we had what are privilege systems of law, which is rights law, and what are command laws, like procedures and commands from authority. Now, then I tried to go take a side trip and said, okay, but what does moral mean? Because I want to be able to talk about what a legitimate law is, right? So I have to talk about what is the moral spectrum. And we got into amoral, ethical, unethical, moral, immoral, virtuous, evil, and we created this spectrum. And these are the first principles that drive, or dimensions that drive it, right? Now, so as long as we understand that that morality consists, morality is definable as reciprocity versus irreciprocity, right? On one hand, why and its costs and gains, and it's direct versus indirect. This is in other words, it's more abstract as we go out to the edge. Now we can go back and we can talk about legitimacy, because it's hard to talk about legitimacy without talking about morality, right?
Sure.
So what do we mean when we say something is legitimate? Isn't that a great made up word?
Yeah.
I love this. It's one of the best. It's up there with authority, and like, what does that mean? Well, authority and legitimacy are part of the same argument, right? It's that someone in authority has produced an action of
It's
legitimacy.
procedurally acceptable, regardless of how bad it makes everybody feel.
So hold on, legitimacy. I wanted to make sure I captured that. So what did I just say? Legitimacy. So authority and legitimacy.
Right.
So someone in authority.
Right.
You notice there's the leg is illegitimate.
Yeah.
So what does legitimate mean? I'm going to try to pull up this. Let's play the game here. I love the dictionary because it's so often absolutely useless.
I don't know.
Conforming.
They keep changing the definitions of words. It's very irritating.
Right. Conforming to laws or rules. Well, so wait for you to come back. There you go. See if they've got an interesting discussion. I'm going to go to the etymology.
This is the 1954 version.
Legitimacy. See, legitimate. So its origin is
There you go. It says make legitimate by decree or enactment. So that's the authority says it's okay.
right.
Yep.
Right. So it's really useful as in always to know the origin of the term.
Yes.
It's actually that your child is legitimate.
Not a bastard, eh? It's a bastardy,
Well, it's fascinating.
which is to say it must stem from a proper patriarch.
It actually means that it's genuine
Yes,
or real.
that's what I've got another one there. No, I read the wrong definition. I read legitimize. According to the law or accepted standards, born in wedlock, reasonable. So that take away that by decree or enactment of authority.
Mhm. So, so the legal version of it, right? So this is the etymology, is child.
Yeah,
And then the second is that it is something to do with a set. How is it in here?
that's what I get for doing it without my cheaters on. According to the law or accepted standards.
Yeah, I'm looking for it should say something to do with it's to gather. From the PIE root leg, to collect or gather, with derivatives meaning to speak or pick out words, right? All the verb legare and all its compounds have a meaning which involves a task or assignment, and therefore be interpreted as derivatives of lex or law.
Yeah.
In other words, task, assignment, command. Now this is the claim. What's the truth? Which is what so I can issue a political product called a law and claim its legitimacy. But what does the market? But does the market buy the law?
That's it.
Right? This is the problem. This is what we mean by settled law. So there is so this is when somebody says it's legitimate. Well, it's legitimate. Why? Well, the problem is that you might agree with it, and I might agree with it. I might not agree with it.
Right.
Right. So is it legitimate? Well, it's legitimate if in the resolution of disputes, it serves the purpose of resolving disputes.
Right.
So the problem is that we go back up to laws. If it's a universal law, we don't get to say whether it's legitimate, right? I mean, it's a function of the fucking universe, right? I mean, we don't have a say in it. So it doesn't even enter into the question of legitimacy. Well, we have to adhere to it. It's a law, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
when an agreement is legitimate if it's reciprocal, right? We know that. Are all rights laws legitimate? No, they don't have to be,
No.
right? But can rights laws evolve into settled law? In other words, they can become settled law, right? We may consider them legitimate even if they're not.
That's so a social construction.
Well, it just means that it's survived it's survived the marketplace,
Right.
right? So legitimacy is that it survives the marketplace. Now, the problem we've gotten into is positive law. So so here's the thing. The natural law, the legitimacy of the natural law. Well, we don't have a choice, right? I mean,
Perfectly legitimate. It's unavoidable.
Natural law, as long as it's under the terms of natural law, those are legitimate because of, just like these, they're laws of nature. It's a law of nature. Rights law may or may not be legitimate, but generally because we compose these things, we are seeking, they're a want, right? And so very often rights are considered, we treat rights as legitimate, but they may not be possible. Because they survive. Survive. In other words, positive laws are very difficult to make last.
Right.
Now we get into positive law, which is my bugaboo. It's the dishonest one. This is the reason I hate about procedure law, is that the dishonest one. A command law, if it just says, well, I just say so, it may not be legitimate, but it's honest.
Right.
A rights law may not be possible, but it's an honest attempt. Natural law, we don't have a choice whether it's honest or not. It's just, that's what it is, right? And the physical laws, we don't have a choice either. So what bothers me about it is positive law.
Right.
Right. As a positive law obtains its legitimacy from process.
That's right.
Right. That's all. They followed a process and procedure, and that's what makes it legitimate, right? In the eyes of the producer, right?
Right.
But is it in the eyes of the consumer?
No, it doesn't matter.
Well,
The consumer is being coerced.
well, this is the issue. Therefore, is it legitimate? What do we mean by legitimate? Do we mean like we mean true and reciprocal? Or do we mean that it simply exists and we are subject to punishment if we don't? Is that a legitimate law?
Yeah, that's where we agree. We agree that this problem here is certainly.
Oh, the one we know is the one that's common, the one that's so beautifully illustrative is abortion. It's not settled. They can issue the legislation by procedural law, right? But the problem is, it can't. It's not turning into it's not legitimizing. In other words, it's a competition between the issuer and the consumer. And so the problem is it turning into legitimate? No, people are going to resist this law for fucking ever.
Right.
Right. Because it's just fundamental to them. And so other people are going to resist not having this. Like, I'm not sure how you consider it right, but whatever. They're always going to be in favor of abortion. So what's the issue? Right? I mean, the issue is that it can't become settled law. Well, let's take it to general knowledge.
So it can't be settled law.
Right. So it can't be legitimate. In other words, it's failed the market test.
Because it's not acceptable to all.
Right. Well, it's not, it doesn't function as intent, it doesn't fulfill the intention.
I want you to erase this by decree or enactment by an authority as an error. That's where I read the wrong definition. You see it under 2 paragraphs up. There you
This
go.
one?
Yes.
You pick that up?
Yeah, that was legitimize.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the problem is that epistemologically, how does epistemology work? You get it. You identify by auto-association idea. You develop a hypothesis,
Okay.
you falsify it in your mind rationally. You develop a theory, you falsify it by the evidence, right? Testing, right? You set it to market, which is publish it, and you'll see if it survives in the market. And we call that settled science. But what's the difference between settled science and settled law? Just the subject matter. Epistemologically, it's the same thing.
Settled means they stopped writing rebuttal articles about it, right? They stopped calling you an idiot, right? Or a madman or a visionary or whatever. They just stopped.
Or they stop calling the court and the government legitimate. This is the
Right.
problem, is that you can pile it up enough illegitimate commands to make legitimate. So what is, to go back to your Leninism, what are they trying to do?
Yeah, they're trying to coerce you into shutting up.
They're not using, they're using, are their commands legitimate? No, they're just, I mean, they're just commands. The legitimacy doesn't come into it. It's whether you can get away with it.
Right.
Which it's a crime. Whereas if it were not a crime, it would be a question of evolving legitimacy. So in most of history, when we incrementally suppress, right?
Right.
So somebody's making a profit there, right? And that's fine, but it eventually becomes settled law, right? Because we've taken that person's ability to engage in irreciprocity or some sort of rent seeking or free riding, right? That we've taken that ability away from them. And so what happens is through incremental suppression, we get rid of this stuff. If through incremental suppression of irreciprocity or incremental grant issuance of the promise of a right, a privilege, which is what it is, right is a privilege, then it becomes settled. I mean, there was a lot of debate about Social Security, right? But it's become settled science because it's become settled law. Is it a good thing? Well, it would be if we did it the Singapore way, but the way we do it the American way is the bad way.
The timer is cooking.
On this unlimited growth, false promise of endless growth. The horn of cornucopia, right?
Right.
Of white man has run out.
Yes.
So we have concept of the authority, the polity, and legitimacy, right? So we have three terms because these are participants.
Right.
Now, if you're totalitarian China, you can issue a command. And so this is what the Leninists want. They don't, it's legitimate merely by the state claiming it's doing good, right? And state claiming it's doing good because it made third. But China has never had law. They've only had command. They call it law.
Right.
But this is the problem, is which kind of law? They've had command law. Is it law? Well, by our standards, no. Right? By their standards, it's the closest analogy they have.
Right.
So if you
Like a man-made facsimile, an idol of the law.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I like that. That was good. So excuse me, I'm gonna think straight here. So we have the authority, the polity, the market.
Yeah.
And legitimacy.
Yeah.
So we have the claim of legitimacy, versus the evidence.
Right.
So this goes back to group evolutionary strategies. In our strategy, we're sovereign. The government is just, the people of the government are just us.
Right.
That's not true in other parts of the world, right? I mean, it's the government in most of the Middle East is them.
Right.
The government in China is a higher up that we must obey. It's a hierarchy. So depending on your civilization, you can do it. When in India, I don't know what the hell's going on there, but
Right.
I mean,
The forces are aligned in such a way that it works.
well, they have, they're Indo-European, so they have Hinduism. They have the IE movement. They have Hinduism. They have the caste system. They have they have a legal system, right? But the thing is, they got the English system, and I mean, if you can get English common law, you are set. It's the thing that matters, and so the problem they have is that they have sovereignty, they have democracy, and they're a rules-based civilization, right? That is, frankly, we wouldn't call it high trust, but it's pretty moral.
Okay.
Right. And so, in other words, moral in the sense that the class system created roles and responsibilities that didn't require coercion or to maintain them. So that's their benefit. Whereas the problem of China is they had the guy with the axe that ran around and chop your fucking head off. So what I've wanted to get across here was that, well, what is legitimate is either true, in other words, it's a scientific function, or what's legitimate is a market function, or in other words, what the individual people consider legitimate, or market or legitimacy is an authoritarian function, right? So which of those is it? So is legitimacy.
So it's an ambiguous statement is what you're saying.
I think that's what I just said, right? Did I screw that up? No, it's market evidence.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm trying to get to legitimacy is just the same thing as epistemology, is the same thing. Science is the same thing as market processes. It's just another means of calculating. And the thing is that while you can say I must obey, I'm obedient, the question of legitimacy doesn't come up under authoritarian.
That's right. It's presumed, right?
If it's individual preference, which is what we have now, or could, in other words, people think that their opinion makes something legitimate,
Right.
instead of market survival. Right. And so this is a great example. The state can claim abortion or transsexual bathrooms or whatever it is. Individuals can differ in it, but the market decides. And the problem is, if the market isn't going to decide, what do you have to do?
Right. That was your civil option right there.
It requires force, and force delegitimizes. So the way they get around this is they succeed in places like Cuba. They don't really care if they're poor. They care that nobody's ahead. This is the problem. This used to be the problem everywhere, but it's the foundation of what you were getting at earlier, which is being left behind.
Right.
Okay, so now let's talk about legitimacy. Did I cover that topic well enough? So we have just evidence of legitimacy, logis is the third of pretense. I can clean this up and go over it next time if you want me to.
Right.
So we have physical, natural, rights, law, procedural authority. We have adaptation in markets or monopoly adaptation. We have authority, polity, survival, legitimacy, which is right. And we have, I think that's all I have to get, right? Authority. See, or I could go for authority. And so authority. I really like this one. Let's do it this way. I don't know which way to take it.
Yeah.
I guess this way.
Yeah. Market evidence is the ultimate legitimacy. So increasing legitimacy. So it should should go the other way. They should get authoritarian pretenses less than individual preferences less than market evidence.
Thank you. I knew something was wrong there.
It's perfectly otherwise ordered.
This is consequence. Right?
Right.
Origins. This is origins.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that's interesting. It's before, during, and after.
oh God, I knew you were going. God damn it, that was.
Well, you keep me around, man.
God, I love you.
Thank you.
No, really, that was beautiful. That would have occurred to me like 6 months from now when I was typing it over for the 15th time. Thank you.
This
That
was
was a
I'm
good
a
start.
time saver, man.
And so I've got, let's just reverse this one then. As
Yeah.
let's just reverse this one to match the others. And so we want to move this to the end.
This points to Quigley again.
Of course, because
Quigley talks about natural law and authoritative law in the, he calls it the Orient, and it is they tend to be ruled by rule of the will of the ruler, and they always try to conquer the world, because the ruler thinks he's the hand of God. And he must enact the will of God on land, and there's no moral holds slowing him down. So he gets to stack skulls wherever he needs to. That's the Leninists.
The problem is, it's. I wish you can't. If you get to the point where you have influence, power, whatever, especially when it gets to be hundreds of people, it's beyond what's the Dunbar number?
Yeah.
And you're in a place where you can systematize that bigger than Dunbar number and hold it in your head. The field of possibilities is pretty interesting, because it's like if you have one guy, you're powerful, but if you add a person to it, it's not a linear progression,
Right.
it's geometric. So as the size of your organization increases, it's a geometric progression of influence, right? And it tends to be a geometric influence in possibilities. Depends on your debt, of course, right? If you have debt, then it's like being weak, and if you have assets, it's like being strong. So the problem is that whether you're in commerce or politics or war, or even in the sciences, right? If you've ever got people behind you, right, that model's running in your head. It is really easy to say, look at all the good things I can do with this toy.
Right.
And I've been there.
And believe it, right?
Yeah, and it's really easy. It's like the guys, because I've been, it's like the guys who've been there, and young women start paying you attention, and you start to believe it, and so you start to act on it, and then all of a sudden it blows up on you. And I understand that feeling, because when you're a middle-aged guy and all of a sudden you're like a Christmas tree for women, right?
Hot potato, man, right?
Right. So these things are all, so it's hard to communicate just how easy it is, because people are like, I wouldn't do that. You absolutely fucking would. Don't tell me your shit. If you absolutely would.
This is Peterson talking about the Leninists. It's like, well, true socialism has never been tried. It's because if I were Stalin, everything would have turned out hunky-dory.
The problem is, the only person you want in that much power is a person who doesn't want it. You have to say, look, I don't want this. I'm only doing this because everybody I know is worse than me. But if you think I'm really great, this is why I should be doing this, you should absolutely not be doing it. Because it's not you. It's the fucking network of people around you, right? That's what matters. Anyway,
that's good.
So we got through to the before, during, and after.
This is the order of the before appears to be in reverse order of all the other ones. Because we go from authoritarian pretense and force to legitimacy and market evidence, and that should be going to the natural law.
Well, that's only because this whole thing is a subset of this one.
Oh, okay.
Right. So
I gotcha.
So I don't know if I need to indicate that on here.
Oh, indent it.
Yeah. Okay. This one too?
I suppose. Because before is all the possibilities that exist. Right.
Yeah. And what you want is, there's the adaptation. I'm trying to get this in here. Marcus equals velocity,
Yes.
right? So I was trying to figure, how can I get that in there, but I'll just leave it there. No, this is the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maladaptation, stagnation,
Yep.
adaptation, velocity.
There you go.
All right,
Mm-hmm.
dude. We're getting good at this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Now I forgot to do this one. So, what does morality mean? Well, the thing is there is, so what is there? There is, where did I go down here?
There it is.
Now we have the problem of variation. So this is going to follow the same pattern. Once you see the epistemological pattern, it becomes really simple how the world is. So we're going to say, well, there's my wants, practiced, evolved norms, this is going, I'm doing this backwards again. Problem is that there is I think what goes here, variation. And so this is the market process, right? It's another market process.
Right.
So the problem we get with morality is that we can define it.
Right.
But morality is simply the universal terms of cooperation. But your needs and wants might be different from mine. their wants and needs and wants might be different from ours. And since male and female sexual reproductive strategies are different, our moral instincts vary. And since we have different capacities, our moral instincts vary, largely because part of reciprocity, when I say reciprocity within the limits of proportionality,
Right.
brings into context the meaning of being left behind. Being left behind means it's outside the bounds of the limits
Reciprocity.
of proportionality, and therefore you're encouraging rebellion or defection. Right? Resistance, rebellion, defection. So this is the importance of when I say reciprocity. Well, that's the basics, but between you and I, but it's when we think of it politically, it's reciprocity within the limits of proportionality, because limits of proportionality determine the limits of resistance, rebellion, or defection.
There's a series there. That's like it's like anti-cooperative resistance, right?
Yes. So again, and the limits proportionality. And I was trying to think if I want to add that in the proportionality. That's actually the major one. I'm trying to think if there are any others. There aren't any. Again, reciprocity of being left behind, incentivizing resistance,
Yes.
rebellion. So this is the general rule.
Yes.
This is a general rule of cooperation, fully explained. Right, and so it applies to everyone. So the problem is my need for proportionality and your need for proportionality vary.
Right.
You know, just childhood, right?
Right.
My neuroticism. All right, varies. Sex differences. They're doing some machine work upstairs. And I don't know what it is, but it's some kind of motor, but it sounds like somebody's trying to die. It's horrible.
I don't hear any of that.
It's disturbing the shit out of me while I'm concentrating.
Sorry.
Right. So your neuron.
Yeah.
Leads to increases or defection. What do you call it? I just grouped this as defection, resistance.
Yeah. It's like degrees of defection.
Right. So the problem is that we are trying to, you have a natural problem of continuous market calculation of what's possible. And so the natural consequence of all of these factors, these differences. Now I went to neuroticism, self-interest, right? But I could also go the opposite, which is confidence, just calm, confidence, or self-image. Right. So, oh shit, where was I?
Loyalty increases your loyalty. It's a loyalty defection.
Right. So this is one of the reasons that's really interesting, is that what's the temporal cost of loyalty? Devotion. Right. What's the temporal and population cost of loyalty and devotion? Well, this is the interesting, because this is the sex difference.
Yeah.
Which is that men are loyal, women devoted. Again, there's an overlap, right? There's
right.
about a third of men really need vaginas. A third
Always say max salt, right?
Right. So the problem is that loyalty, that's loyalty to many over time, and devotion to few in time. Male and female. I wonder, it's like I get this thing from some the other day, and it's like, I finally get it. He starts describing it to me. Is it the number of patterns here is not that large?
No, it's not.
Right.
It's fractal in nature. It just kind of repeats at all the different levels in an interesting way.
So, but he said that he says he agreed with something someone said earlier, is that if you just understand, all we have to do is vary neural economies, you get these different behaviors. It's the simplest fucking mechanism in the world to express these things. And how do you develop that? Well, you just provide a little more of one hormone and a little less of another, and the brain will grow in the direction of calculating what it's been encouraged to. And it doesn't, we think these things are complicated. Well, they're complicated because the manifestation of these first principles is fucking enormous, right?
Right.
The fractal consequence. What you understand is just, there's a brain, it's got two halves, it works from back to front, it's works inside to side. The male hormone focuses on intertemporal and quick, and the female focuses on temporal and more, right? More sensitivity. The males are devoted over time because of that, and women are, the males are loyal over time because of that, women are devoted in time. And you see all human experience coming up from this fucking minor variation in in the organization of the brain.
You just said it in a very indirect way, that we are all bots. And you didn't even notice, man.
Well, it's the beauty of evolution on one hand. And it's like, I don't understand why people have, to me, that knowledge is so inspiring, it's divine.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It is. It's just it's wonderful that it can do such a simple setup can generate such potentials.
And so it's just extraordinary. I just find it beautiful, right? I mean, it's just beautiful. But on the other hand, there's the part of you is we're just fucking bots. Now, the difference is, when I say we're just fucking bots, some of us are bots and we're fucking forever going to be bots. And you know what we need? We need other people to give us programs, right?
That's what the Leninists are for.
Right, exactly. Right. And then some of us have this thing called intelligence, which is the wrong thing, wrong word. And what it means is we adapt faster, so we can write our own programs. So you got to be given it. Some of us can choose programs. Some of us can write programs.
Right, it's firmware.
That's all. It's not even complicated. And so if you think of it that way, it's like, just, stop calling people stupid. You can't write your own program. Your program doesn't allow you to even pick which program. You need a program.
I tell you, this is interesting. It's like this. And I revert to the Hebrew again, because stupid means to be led. Now, right? It's very interesting, isn't it? It's like this. It's like, the interesting thing is they require a leader, and it's like the leader can be a Leninist, or it can be someone who actually leads them for their own best interest.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into a very disturbed lady this morning, young lady, and she's like psychologically disturbed because her brother died, and she's having all kind of problems. And it's like this. It's like this. Look, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. Your thinking is disordered, and you need to get it under control. You're just fine. But the way you're thinking about it is the problem. And she agreed with that premise, right? And it's like I said, you got to watch out for the psychiatrist, because they're going to tell you something's wrong with you and give you drugs. It's like not going to help you.
There's nothing wrong. You're having a normal reaction to loss.
It's supposed to be like that. If you didn't do that, you're not a human.
It would be bad for you to not feel like that, right?
That would disturb me.
No, yeah, and you don't want people around you who don't feel that way.
That's right. That's right.
We have all these weird laws, but it's like this weird law of like abusing animals. Well, I mean, they're fucking animals. On the other hand, if you're going to do that to an animal, I don't want you around my kids. I don't want you in my neighborhood. I mean, I want you hanging at the end of a rope.
You're not right.
There's something wrong with you, and you're a danger. And it turns out, which is I think is humorous, that of course, if you look at psychopaths, that's how you identify them. So I'm like, okay, it turns out that all these taboos we have, right? They have an absurdly
right. It's like an instinctual response. You're like,
yes.
That it's not right.
It's not right. Get it out of here. Throw it. We need a ceremonial cliff like Sparta. I'm saying this just to make. I'm saying this just to make Eli Harmon laugh.
Oh, is that what it is?
Right. Just to make Eli Harmon.
In Northern Europe, they had peat bogs for this, right?
Well, exactly. In Sparta, you threw them off a cliff. And in Northern Europe, we slit your throat and threw in a peat bog.
Yeah, Northern Europe, they find your body 300 years later. And
yeah.
Go, wow, look at that. That's an interesting form of fossilization. Oh my. Oh my.
Oh my God. Anyway. Oh no. So
just for illustrative purposes, it's hyperbolic expression, children.
Exactly. Well, and that's the problem, is that conservatives, it's no wonder that Kant came up with, the Kantian imperative, right? Is that what the fuck do you think conservatives are using when they're saying hyperbola? They're saying this is what happens over time at scale, right? So it sounds really dramatic to a leftist, but it's just science.
Right.
Right.
Or it's like the ultimate extension of this curve.
Right. I mean, it's
like this is how it has to end.
So we use it. We use this absurdity, right, in order to make the case, to make it stick out, to show, right? And it's completely sensible because we have intertemporal brains, right? Now, the problem for the left is that they see everything in experience as a temporal brain. In other words, they're devoted, not loyal. In other words, they're female, not male. Like I said, the number of patterns is really small. So when they hear something, they're offended, right? Because they hear this as me and really, rather than, or that outlying person there and really, more rather than, well, if we let this get out of hand, this is where it goes. So that conservatives talk in politics, right? And liberals talk in families. And it's like they can't even conceive of it. And the more I work on this, the more frustrated I get is that we just got to separate because they're literally incapable, right? We'd have to indoctrinate leftists, the children of leftists, as heavily as the left tries to indoctrinate the right, because they're so
That's very rude.
dysfunctional. Huh?
That's exceptionally rude.
So that's why I keep saying I don't want to live with these people. I'd prefer we could ship them off to their own island, say Canada. I was trying to get a laugh out of you.
I was thinking Madagascar, but that's okay. Just saying, just a thought. It's not that was hyperbolic as well.
Anyway,
Yep,
so anyway, so we just what we did here is we covered what I wanted to get across was legitimacy and morality. So now that people are, this morality explains, in other words, our understanding of the individual variation in individuals and their moral instincts. In other words, the individual is broadcasting when his moral statements and saying, here are the terms of my cooperation. Here are the terms of my cooperation. Now, unfortunately, here are the terms of my cooperation on a small scale is really useful. In other words, it's voluntary, right? You can self-sort. But the problem is when you get up to democracy, all of a sudden, now there's no now you've taken a qualitative, no, excuse me, you've taken an arbitrary difference between individuals who will self-sort, and you've coerced it into with a victory of one of those over the others, right? And the problem is, without rule of law, that victory will always gravitate toward the destruction of natural law. All right, it will always gravitate toward authoritarianism, monopoly authoritarianism, stagnation and decline, because that's the natural case of the natural course of progress of any demand for stability or certainty over opportunity and competitive excellence. In other words, evolution is going to play out. You get these hopeful liberals. Oh, but we'll do this. That's called faith.
We have to try.
That's called faith. That's a religion. But we don't realize that your Marxist neo-Marxist postmodern religion is the horn of cornucopia, right? Is the myth of endless growth. Well, and if I say, well, most of our wealth today is because we discovered how to burn dead shit, right? I mean, that's really the answer. Otherwise, we'd have to go back to animal labor, which means you will be back on your knees grinding corn. So there is the endless growth is a matter of, can we calculate innovation faster than we can stagnate? And so the problem is the left is always wrong.
It's impressive to me. I like, if I had a perfect negative indicator like that on the market, I'd be so wealthy. I can only swear.
They're always wrong. And they keep saying, but what about, what about? And you say, every one of your projects produced a temporary gain, right? That would already have been achieved by natural processes without the externalities, right? And so those were all attempts to interfere with adaptation. So the cost of your urgency, which is your self-satisfaction, instead of natural evolution, is that you create maladaptation. So every one of the left's policies, which have been to override natural law, has resulted in some win they're very proud of, that actually created an expanded maladaptation.
They always say this. They always, I hate to say it like that, but it seems to be true, which is, but who could have foreseen?
Well, yeah, that's why we call it female mind versus male mind, or empathizing versus systematizing. Here's the deal. We know you're blind. You don't know you're blind. This is the problem. Now, are you going to say we are careless? No, that's not our job. Your job is to care about the temporal. That's what your brain evolved for. Our job is to systemically predict the future and limiting your care to that which isn't harmful. Right? That's it. And, you know, if we could make that work, which we could, I just don't know if I'd like to it'd be violation of allowing people to self-modify. But if we could sort of figure out how to organize that cooperation between the center left and the center right, we wouldn't have a problem. Is that the center left would think about what are all the things we can do within the limits of, in other words, what is everything we can do that serves people's interests while making them adapt? In other words, not freeing them from the necessity of adaptation, because adaptation is always stressful. What are we doing to ameliorate stress and to help them progress, while at the same time staying in the limits of what the system thinkers are producing as a prediction of outcomes? If we could produce the judicial versus the priestly, we'd be fine, right? But it's just like, it's like the judicial seems to work just fine, but as soon as you get the priestly, the hyper-consumptive Marxist, whatever, as soon as the female mind is let loose, it's just hyper-consumptive. It can't stop itself. And this happens in every fucking time we let it out of the Pandora, out of the box. I don't know.
Very interesting.
I just frustrated myself.
I'm sorry. It's gonna be all right, man. This is necessary. It's like a reciprocating function. It's overreaching each direction, and it bounces, and it's like we're heading toward this bounce, and I think it will get darker before it gets lighter. We're definitely heading toward a bounce, though, because the response of the people who don't think like the Leninists is building rapidly.
Yeah, which I'm kind of surprised by, honestly. You get down to making moms pissed off, and then
Honestly, it's like, who would have thought that was a good idea?
Well, it's because they believe their own stupidity, and they always double down because in neural economy, they're being self-rewarded. It's the same problem with, the Genghis Khan phenomenon. You're self-rewarded by all these things of doing good. And you start getting, you're so enthralled and entertained by this attention, by the membership, by the feeling of accomplishment as part of this group. It's so fucking rewarding, especially, right, that you become addicted to that, because the idea of ending that, it's like this is why the liberals, it's never enough, because it's the process of working together that they enjoy, right, to achieve their goals. That's why their goals always shift from across the spectrum, and they've gone into ridiculous now, because their whole world is built around this sort of thing, and they can't tolerate that the project is over and they have to go do something else. And so this is
a neural economy issue there, because it's like I have to think of something different to do.
And why would I do that when this is this much fun and we're having this much? And
like
I don't,
the boys would say the hunting party's over.
Well, this is, people flock in school till they exhaust an opportunity. The problem is the exhaustion of some opportunities leads to you getting the guillotine. Right?
A metaphorical guillotine, by the way.
Right. Well, but
I have to say that it's a caveat.
The French Revolution.
Disclaimer. Yes.
Just can't, look at the terrors of Napoleon. How can anybody think the French Revolution was a good idea? Europeans are fucking stoned. They're stoned on a mythos. It's like the Russians are stoned on the mythos of the Great War. The Germans are stoned on the myth of of their own evil, when actually they were trying to do the right thing, at least in the First World War. And the French are stoned that they actually invented something good instead of actually destroyed the foundations of Western civilization. the Ashkenazi and their Marxist postmodern neo-Marxists, they think they're doing something good, except what they're really doing is destroying evolution itself. So I mean, people believe their own stupid shite, right? They just do, and they like being on a team that's
right.
playing whatever game it is, and it's because they're bots. They don't know any better.
Until the rotten end, right? Isn't that how it goes? Because it's like it's the same as junkies, okay? And I work with these people they're junkies, and it's like, you know, and I like work with the families of junkies, and that's even worse. Which is the families of junkies is like they're trying to help their kid, and their kid is doing this spiraling thing, and it's like, you better let go of that anchor, because that is not taking you to the surface, okay? And it's like they don't bounce until they hit the bottom.
Yep.
And it's like that's when you fully adapt, when you're forced to adapt, when you're in a maladaptive state.
Yep.
And that's how it is. And it's like, so that there's no gentle way to cause people, you're not going to convince them to adapt, right? They're going to double down until they can't.
Yep.
Sorry. Now, did I depress you more?
No, that's wonderful.
Good. It's just how it is. And it's like, life is good. Let's do this again tomorrow.
Love you, brother. Thank you. So we covered, just want to summarize, make sure I know what I'm doing.
Right.
So we got through, we're working on legitimacy and morality. And I don't think I quite tied together how morality affects legitimacy, did I? In other words,
Not quite. It's very nearly done.
okay, so we'll do that tomorrow.
Very good.
All right.
All right, Kurt. Have a good evening.
Take care, brother.
Bye.